K24 This Morning. We're still looking at the big stories of the day and getting your feedback as well at K24 TV. I can also SMS us on 21222. If you're into WhatsApp, the WhatsApp number will be scrolling at the bottom of your screen. We'd love your feedback as we get into the second part of the show. I have a tweet from Nick Senior saying, no going abroad for specialized treatment. They never came up with medical policies to improve the healthcare system. Now, Corona is here as a wake-up call. Indeed, Nick, Corona has been called the great equalizer as far as that's concerned. Shazad Karinga Simon, I guess we need to test everyone. Now, watu wakwe isolated. That's the only way to have all of us tested, because some people still think this is a joke. Shazad, we hear you on that. Linda Nyongesa, truth, the 4 cases that have been there, I had people who also contacted them. So the government really needs to be very vigilant with what it does, because it's a long trail if you actually think about it. Okay, Linda, we hear you on that particular one. One more tweet before we get into back to the discussion. Richard Papa Ekwaro. Kenyan government is joking. What they need is cash, and cash they can get from the World Bank. Okay, we hear you. Richard will be discussing that particular issue as well. You can tweet us, of course, at K24 TV. You can also SMS us on 21222. We'll be looking at the import situation and how that's looking at. But right now, let's talk about the cash. Because as we went to the break, Ben has spoken about the fact that we'd like government to give tax breaks. There's been lots of demands from the government, probably some people looking at a stimulus package. We've seen what the United States has done, what other European countries have done. But I'll start with Kiprono on this one, because we're looking at a government that's expected to give us a stimulus package that hasn't been performing really well revenue-wise. Where do they get the money from?
I think there's a misnomer that a stimulus package is about giving money. It can be about policy measures that actually stimulate business activity. Late last year, I wrote an article in the local dailies about what they could do in terms of stimulating the economy. One of the things, for example, that I argue strongly for is the fact that we haven't appointed judges, particularly land judges. The president needs to really look at that matter, because there's a lot of backlog on land cases. Land is a factor of production. In many instances, people are not able to go into production because their land is entangled in one way or another. And we know that the resources we have in the judiciary to handle land cases are very low. One of the other measures, for example, is trading off tax dues on tax payables. There is no such provision in Kenya. If you owe tax and you are owed by the taxman, there is no set of mechanism. One of the measures could be that we have a set of mechanisms. So if I owe VAT and I'm owed perhaps money for supplying either county or national government, there should be a mechanism where I can set off so that my cash flow is eased. One of the other measures could be with the commercial banks. I mean, perhaps a renegotiation of debts. You see, right now, for example, in a situation that we're in a potential lockdown, so most of the businesses will be operating on lower turnover. So on lower turnover, you will not be able to achieve your profit targets. So if you borrowed against a business plan that is fundamentally affected now by the coronavirus, then the banks should be able to come to the table and say, fine, in the circumstances, we will negotiate. If you had a 24-month repayment, maybe we extend it to 36, 48 months. So I think if we look at Dubai, for example, Sheikh Mohammed last weekend announced 15 measures to stimulate the Dubai economy in the circumstances that we are in. He also announced a $1.5 billion package to shore up businesses. I think for me, this is really the time that the government needs to look at how they can develop policies that will actually stimulate business activity at SME level. Yes.
So that's what we really need to look at. It's not only the hard cash, but also other incentives around the business environment that need to be looked at. I'll come to you as well, Churchill, on this one, because everyone looking at the government getting a long list of demands on what it needs to do. Coming off, as we said before the break, sluggish economy at that particular point in time. What is actually feasible moving forward for the government in what it can deliver to the different business sectors?
Yeah, it's true. Just to paint a picture of how fragile the economy is, looking at there's an indicator that we normally follow, the Purchasing Managers Index, PMI, and the last 2 months it was in contraction between, that is January and February. It's just showing that even the private sector itself was facing a rough patch. And combining with COVID-19, you're seeing that now it could even be worse, even going forward for the small businesses. And of course, on the other side, you find that all these demands for the government. But that said, I think these issues need to be tackled private sector, public sector, now the government coming in place. And in addition to that, stimulus, there's a monetary policy and public health awareness. So there are so many combinations to it. If you look at the case for the US, I remember that 2 weeks ago they reduced their interest rate to 1.1%. 1%, between 1% to 1.25%. But the direct measure of that, if you look at the financial markets, that's where I'm usually operating at. You find that even the stock index tanked for 2 occasions after that. Over the course of the weekend, on a Sunday night, you saw that they reduced further to 0%, between 0% to 0.25%. Monday, when we woke up, you saw that even the markets tanked. So there's that element that one of these things cannot work in isolation. Next week we are having a CBK having its monetary policy committee meeting to look at the central bank rates. Right now is at 8.25%, but by and large you expect that there could be a cut looking at this current environment. But that said, we're seeing that that is addressing one facet of it, is addressing the cost of some things, cost of credit. But on the other side, we need to get that fiscal or some of those issues that Kiprono has addressed, not only on the monetary, not only on the cash elements, but just to reduce even the, to stimulate some of these businesses. So it is a multi-pronged approach whereby we're seeing fiscal coming together, we are seeing monetary policies coming together, and in addition to that, there could be some of these things quite specific. Is it that the public health, mostly because this is a public health issue, is not something to do with financials as per se directly, but something COVID is mainly public health. So we could see some of the focus, even as the policy, the government come up with some of the policies, we could get it to at least elevate the health status in the nation. So all these things need to come together so that you can be able to tackle this issue.
Okay. We also have the chair of the Nairobi Importers Association. Before I come to you, Bonaben, Apollo Kamau, our very own reporter, had been keeping a keen eye on the port and sea trade as well. And the government has announced it will allow sea vessels and cargo aircrafts carrying goods to the country from China in a move aimed to cushion the economy from the impact of the coronavirus. Now, some people have wondered, is this the right move and time? Health CS Mutahi Kagwe's announcement today, yesterday means cargo ships that have stalled in the Indian Ocean high waters can now dock at the port of Mombasa. In Naivasha, the picture is, however, not so as rosy as it seems on this particular issue. Apollo Kamau had that story. Let's take a look.
In an effort to cushion the economy from the impact of the coronavirus, the Kenyan government will now allow cargo ships and aircraft from Asian countries, among them China, to dock at the port of Mombasa and at the country's 2 key airports, Moi International Airport in Mombasa and Jomo Kenyatta International Airport in Nairobi.
We have considered and found ways of ensuring that cargo vessels, cargo aircrafts or ships can come into the country provided they are disinfected at the point of departure and the crew quarantined on arrival.
The bold move on the face of a deadly pandemic that has killed hundreds in Asia and Europe will unlock the flow of goods to the country and save businesses that depend on imports, mainly from China, Singapore, and other Far East countries.
There is coronavirus. After coronavirus, there will still be Kenya and there will still be the world.
Even before the country's new infections became public, traders were feeling the heat as imports from China fell. Data from the Kenya Ports Authority show that 3 container ships belonging to Evergreen Shipping Line of China will now dock after roaming the high seas. So are 3 bulk carriers carrying fertilizer, wheat and sorghum from Singapore and China. Another ship from China carrying steel will also be allowed to dock. The Kenya Ports Authority had projected a drop in revenues, compounded by a further reduction of storage revenues. But with a new directive, things will now look up. In the month of January this year, 126 ships docked at the port, 43 of them container ships, bulk carriers at 23, and 13 oil tankers, showing the impact of the port on the economy. From October to December 2019, the Kenya Ports Authority raked in 13.5 million shillings in revenue. But it's not so rosy miles away in the flower farms in Naivasha, where tens of farm workers are being sent home, while others stare at job losses due to cancellation of flights to flour markets in Europe. Farmers have now resorted to dumping the precious commodity that fetches high prices in European markets. The Kenya Flour Council says only 50% of its production was reaching the market, making the losses run into millions. Apul Kamal, K24 Evening.
Painting a picture of what it looks like from an importing point of view, as well as horticulture stands right now. We also have, as I said earlier, the chair of the Nairobi Importers Association. As you can see, the government's trying as much as it can to try and keep that industry moving, making sure the goods are coming into the country. What's your take on that particular directive? Are they doing enough? What are they looking at in that particular chain?
Well, I think that's a great move from CS Kagwe. You realize that the fact or the truth is that ships are being turned away at the port of Mombasa. And even if you go at ICN at Embakasi, you not see any alive of the containers. That to mean the port has been affected, loss of income, that is duty, and also even the other beneficiaries who work there were losing jobs. The other bit is there were no cargo coming in. So even if you go there, you cannot see any new container, either PIL or Evergreen from China. So that would unlock a bit. But now the question is, if you look at the economy, the impact, the dollar is already at 104. It has gone from 101 to 104. So that's again another bit that probably central bank should also come in, because that has given us hope that we can also order online. But you see now the dollar is at 104. If it can be cut down or reduced to about 101 or even 100, that will encourage the importers. And you see, Kenya is an importing country.
Right.
From the construction industries to almost everything, we import 80%.
Right.
So if we can be able to unlock that, that's a positive move from the CS Kagwe. But again, you realize there are no travels. We cannot travel to China. So how do you order? What trust? That's why we were saying all the government agencies and even the bodies, KM, KEPSA, all these bodies should come in and look into a way. How do we guarantee that even if you send money to your supplier in China, that money is safe, it's guaranteed? These are some of the questions, especially for the small traders who do consolidation. You know, one container, you send money from different directions, and then we have our people who load our goods in China. They are not there. They have not gone back because there are restrictions. You cannot go back to China. So some of our logistics people are still in this country.
Right.
So, and that's where the majority of small traders and most importers rely on.
Right, and I think it's interesting you've mentioned that because as Kipona had also said, these are just also some of the opportunities that are there in terms of now that we have this trust deficit in terms of how the money gets there and the goods come here. Someone should be thinking about how they can actually play that conduit and make sure that even in this particular point in time, the money will get there and the businessmen can rest assured that their goods and products will get to this particular side of the country.
We were talking to Chairman Commerce, and they could talk to their counterparts on the other side, and probably even the embassy on the other side, that we have a big bank, where Bank of China, where with our colleagues here or the banking industry can also give a guarantee that if I send money to this particular person, the embassy can guarantee this is a genuine person or a genuine exporter. So that kind of a guarantee. You see where we are coming from. Trust is very important. And we need to move it to the higher level that now you can import. They're telling, the CS has talked about now allowing the ships from the China and the rest to come in. That means there are already goods which were denied entry. And they could unlock. And in this country, if you look at even the chemicals that are making I want to go back there, the chemicals that are making the sanitizers and the rest are imported. The pharmaceuticals are also affected. Paracetamol, which comes from India and the rest, there was also that limitation.
Right.
So we really need to work 247
Right.
to see that we unlock our economy.
Okay, and even let's talk about that because one issue that has been, do you want to, you have rejoined
Yeah,
that?
I think
Okay,
for
please.
me, the counter-argument on the dollar, you see, Mr. Mutahi is talking on behalf of importers.
Right.
The exporters are delighted by the dollar.
They're having a field day.
And if we look at our economy, it's also primarily, I mean, our foreign exchange reserves are primarily driven by tea, coffee, and horticultural exports, as well as service industry like tourism, that are dollar earning. And they're very delighted because now they earn greater revenue.
Right.
And in that, among those stakeholders, there's always been a feeling that our shilling is highly overvalued. I think for me, the point of the matter is that we need to change our mindset from an importing economy to an exporting economy.
Right.
Our manufacturers today are no longer even regionally competitive. We cannot talk about being globally competitive if in the region we are losing out our market share.
Right.
And I think for me, this is a real wake-up moment because you see, we have been heavily reliant on India. We've been heavily reliant on China. What about now? Why don't we look at what it is that we can do to enhance our own manufacturing capacity?
Right.
We know that manufacturing is a factor of many costs, and primarily the cost of energy. The government has announced a very important and very significant reduction in the cost of energy if you move your manufacturing plant to the SEZ in Naivasha,
right,
where the geothermal resources are, with a very short evacuation distance. So I think industries now need to think about moving there.
Right.
If we look what's going on in Ethiopia, I mean, they're going to have our lunch. And I think if we continue to preoccupy ourselves with importing from China, sorry, I know that's your business, those are stakeholders that you represent, the time has come now that we need to look at, in the event of a meltdown such as this, what is it that we can do? And on the ships and the vessels and the aircraft that are landing, I think to me, we should try as much as possible not to grind the global economy to a halt. I think if measures are being taken to ensure that the virus is not penetrating the country, I think for me, so be it. And I'm sure the government would not irresponsibly make a decision to say, let those vessels land. Already we've seen that they have said that there will be quarantine of the maritime staff around those vessels.
Right.
And for me, that's enough. I mean, I don't think we should grind the economy.
Okay. And it's interesting because I wanted to come to that particular point of view because even as we talk about how we can actually ramp up our exports, so to speak, before all of this had happened, tea exports had taken a drop, horticulture had already taken a drop. It was foreign remittances that were actually bringing more foreign exchange than these others. At this particular point in time, how does the government look back on that and try and fix this particular sector up?
You see,
in the times that we have.
We can't have that conversation without talking about the Big Four agenda. And of the Big Four agenda, in my opinion, especially the food security, it's just a joke. Right. I mean, we, as a country, we take agriculture, it's just a complete joke. I mean, we farm in Trans-Nzoia. We see the farms in Laikipia. We see the farms in Uasin-Gishu. Go to any of these agricultural regions and find out, is there any support whatsoever from the government? And
so is it a joke from the planning phase or the execution is where they drop the ball?
I think that the president had a very good and bold idea that we should have food security. But then the reality on the ground is different. You know, they used to say, mambo kwa ground, ni different. If you go to the ground today for farmers, I mean, there's nothing that is going on. I mean, there's even the most basic support, that is extension services, are non-existent. You know that in the 10, 15, 20 years ago, you had extension workers on the farms helping farmers in their practice. And you know, the reality about agriculture is that a successful agriculture, like Israel has proved, like the Netherlands has proved, like the Latin American countries, Brazil and Argentina have proved, is a fusion between capturing your water resources and scientific intervention, your R&D. How much are you using contemporary agricultural techniques are you using and access to sufficient water?
Right.
In Kenya, you go to these chambers, there's no water anywhere. We have big, huge dams being built. And one of the things that we have in the agricultural sector, I've been saying to the government many times, what about if you enabled the farming communities to have access to water that can power their irrigation? You see, right now, we are living in the reality of climate change. It's raining when it's supposed to be dry.
Right. It's
dry when it's supposed to be raining. Temperatures are high when they should be low. They're low when they should be high. So we are living in a very unpredictable environment. So if we are still depending on rain-fed agriculture, like Kenya still does, where do you expect to go?
Okay, a key question to be asked right there, especially as we look at the Big Four and how it will actually be achieved. Even before we get to our second break, Church, I want to come to you because on Friday, after the announcement of the first case of corona in the country, the markets took a big hit. They had to close the markets earlier than usual just to stem that particular tide. Coming into this particular week as well, we've seen a couple of drops. And the thing is, it's not only in Kenya. Globally, markets taking a huge hit on this. How do you see this playing out? Can we afford to ride this storm out? Where does it stand from where you stand?
Let me just bring it into context. You find that the local market is dominated by foreign investors. They're the ones who on a daily basis account to roughly 60–70% of the trading activity. And you look at their markets where they are, you find that there's that kind of, with all this coronavirus, it's not just containment in terms of people moving, but even in terms of asset allocation or investment decisions. So you find that people are now turning inward back to their countries, and hence you find that even these foreign investors, they're exiting the markets that they're investing, Kenya being case in point. But what we are seeing primarily, even what is leading to these dips even in the market, is you find that we've seen interest rate in the US has been reduced to 0%. You find that this massive injection of liquidity, but now it's now targeted to the banks. It's not going to the real economy in the sector. So you find that what the market is perceiving is that, okay, you can't reduce the cost of credit by reducing the interest rate to 0. You can't pump massive liquidity to the banks. They are the ones they can't be able to transmit to the businesses. What they are saying is that is addressing one side of the coin, that is on the demand side of the coin, because all these things are supposed to ensure that the consumer now goes back to start spending. But if on the other side of the coin, that's the supply side, factories in China, people are not producing enough, so they'll find that there's nothing to be produced. So you find that what the market is punishing is that the profits in the near future will tank based on all these things playing out. Hence, we are seeing that even frontier markets such as Kenya, we've been having that hit, and it just points to the fact that, one, these things has to be multi-pronged. We can't find a situation whereby the central banks or is just acting in isolation. We need to find massive injection of perhaps even some of this liquidity to the businesses which need it, which can now be able to get some cash flows. And that's what you're seeing even in the central bank in the US came up with a facility which was similar to what was there in the global financial crisis in 2008, whereby now instead of just pumping the cash to the banks, now they are directly putting it to the businesses. But that said, in the Kenyan market, you can't find something similar to that. We don't have CBK having emergency powers to, rather than reduce the liquidity or even to inject monies to the where Gidai sits in terms of the importers association. So you find that now we are at the bearing the brunt of all these factors happening. Okay. But that said, you find that the Kenya is quite a frontier. It's quite a frontier market. It's not relying heavily on oil. Just as you compare with the sub-Saharan African countries, you find that most of these investors, they look at Africa as one big basket, and then they sort of give allocations to different nations. And if you compare Kenya to a country like Nigeria, a country like Angola, a country like Zambia, which are quite commodity reliant countries, you find that oil has really come down to $20 per barrel in the last, from $29 per barrel rather, from $59 per barrel in mid-February. So that's a $30 per barrel decline in revenue. So you find some of these countries like Nigeria, Angola, Zambia, which are relying in commodities, they've been having a brand.
They're taking a hit on this.
So in the near future, as things start to ease, we find that Kenya will now be a darling in the sub-Saharan African space.
Let's take, we need to take a short break on that. We'll come back. We'll get your point on that. And also, we'll try and get in touch with the CEO of the Nairobi Securities Exchange, Geoffrey Odundo, also to discuss what happened as far as last week is concerned. And even as we get into this week, how things are looking moving forward. Keep your tweets coming in. You can get us at K24 TV. Willis Muredi says, having come through the JKIA, the staff at the airport, both airside and landside, are active actively potential victims. The government should make sure they run tests down there on these particular people who are working hard but are also exposed to these particular hazards. Willis, we hear you on that. I will take a short break. We are back with more. This is K24 This Morning.